They say the happiest day of your life is the day your kid is born. And I guess for a while, I believed that. My name's Adam. Just your average guy, mid-30s, owns more tools than I probably need, loves a cold beer after mowing the lawn. I work in HVAC. Not glamorous, but honest work. I come home dusty and tired, and that used to mean something. I used to open the door to a smile. A hot meal, even. That was before. Before the questions started. Before I had to wonder who my wife really was. Before I started seeing our life like one of those old Polaroids, faded at the edges and not quite how I remembered it. Sarah and I met back in college. She was in early education. I was already doing part-time gigs in heating and cooling, sweating through crawl spaces while she studied at the library. I'd pick her up after class, and we'd drive around aimlessly, blasting 90s rock and pretending life wasn't just beginning to happen to us. I loved her fast, and I loved her deep. The kind of love that makes you overlook things, like the way she'd always keep certain things to herself. Little things, back then. Harmless, I thought. We got married young, maybe too young, but it felt right at the time. We bought a fixer-upper, turned it into a home. She taught kindergarten. I hustled for jobs, built a reputation. We laughed a lot in those early days. Had our fights too, don't get me wrong, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then came the news. She was pregnant. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor, watching her stare at the stick like it had just told her future. She cried. I did too. Not out of fear, but something else, a kind of awe. I was going to be a dad. We both were. I felt needed. For the next 9 months, I did everything I could to make her comfortable. I drove to midnight cravings. Painted the nursery 3 times until she picked the right yellow. I was all in. And yeah, I bragged about her glow to the guys at work. She really did light up a room back then. I didn't see the storm coming. You never do. The day my son was born should have been the proudest moment of my life. Should have been. We got to the hospital at 4 a.m. after Sarah's water broke in a panic somewhere between the kitchen and the garage. I grabbed the bag, drove like a man possessed, and held her hand through every contraction. I counted breaths, rubbed her back, wiped her forehead. I was there. I was present. And when the baby finally came, I swear I stopped breathing for a second. The room filled with those first cries, and I looked at him, my boy, swaddled up. I shut tight, whole life ahead of him. But then I saw his skin. Now, let me just say, I'm not some idiot. I know babies come out looking all sorts of weird. Purple, red, slimy, squished, that newborn thing, it's not glamorous. But this wasn't that. His skin was noticeably darker than either of ours. And I mean noticeably. I'm a pale guy. Sarah's even lighter. Neither of us have much in the way of melanin. But this baby had a warm, golden brown tone to him. And I'm standing there, staring, while the nurse is cooing and Sarah's beaming like she just crossed a finish line. And all I could think was, something's not right. I didn't say anything. What was I going to do? Accuse her right there in the delivery room? I plastered a smile on my face, even cut the cord. But inside, I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The photos were taken. Family congratulated us over video calls. Nurses came and went. But my mind stayed locked on one thing. The baby didn't look like me. I didn't sleep that night. Sarah was passed out from the meds, and I just sat there in the dim hospital chair, cradling this little boy, wondering what the hell had just happened to my life. And then, the seed was planted. That's when I first let the thought take root, the thought I didn't want to believe. What if this baby isn't mine? Back home from the hospital, things were supposed to feel magical. The nursery was ready. Bottles cleaned. Rocking chair by the window. My parents sent a care package. Her sister dropped off frozen meals. But nothing tasted right. Nothing felt right. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Babies change. Skin tone shifts. Genetics are weird, right? Maybe there's something deep in the family tree I didn't know about. Sarah said her great-grandmother was Italian. Maybe that explained it. I looked it up. Didn't help. But the more I stared at this baby, the more I felt off. It wasn't just the skin color. It was everything. His nose, his hairline, the shape of his eyes. He was beautiful, don't get me wrong, but he didn't feel like mine. Not in the way I expected. Not in my gut. Sarah acted normal. Like too normal. She was tired, yeah, but not guilty tired. Just new mom tired. Smiling, nursing, watching reruns on the couch like nothing had changed. And me? I was losing it quietly. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't focus. Started avoiding mirrors because I didn't like what I saw. This guy smiling at a kid he might not have made. but I didn't say a word. Not yet. I told myself I needed more than a gut feeling. I needed proof, something more than a weird hunch and a baby that didn't look like me. So I started watching. Sarah's phone habits. The way she answered texts. The time she said she was going to the store and came back an hour later with a single bag of groceries. Small stuff. Tiny red flags. Stuff I'd never even noticed before. Now they were all I could see. I started with the obvious, her phone. Now, I'm not proud of it, but when you've got a pit in your stomach 24/7 and your brain won't shut up, you do things you swore you'd never do. Late one night, Sarah was passed out cold from exhaustion, baby on one side, white noise machine humming on the other. I slid her phone off the nightstand and tiptoed out of the room like some broke version of James Bond. No password. She'd never changed it from the usual, her birthday. That stung a little, honestly. Like she didn't even think I'd ever snoop. Like the thought of me suspecting her never crossed her mind. I scrolled. Messages were mostly normal. Group chats with other new moms. Some family threads. Her sister sending memes. I almost put the phone down. Almost. Then I found his name. It was under something stupid, like Jen from Lamaze. Cute. I opened it, expecting a dead end. But there they were. Messages. Flirty. Vague at first. Then more frequent. No photos. No, I love yous. Just enough to make me sit back in that kitchen chair and realize I wasn't imagining things. They talked about missing the way things were. About how she felt more alive when they were together. I couldn't even find a name. Just initials. TB. That's when my hands started shaking. The baby cried upstairs and I didn't even flinch. I just sat there, staring at that screen, realizing I wasn't crazy after all. I'd been right. Something was off. And now, I needed to know who the hell TB was. TB. That was all I had. No full name. No photos. Just initials and a few texts that read like the tail end of something that had already happened. And probably more than once. I knew better than ask her outright. That'd just give her time to spin it, clean it up, lie if she had to. I needed more. Solid. Undeniable. So I got creative. I started checking our shared calendar. We used this dumb color-coded app to plan everything: baby checkups, grocery runs, the occasional date night we used to squeeze in before life went sideways. She'd logged a few solo errands the month before. Doctor's appointments, supposedly. I cross-checked the dates with phone activity, yeah. I went that deep. She texted TB on every single one of those appointment days. Nothing outrageous. Just enough to light up that little instinct in the back of my head that said, this isn't nothing. Then I remembered the guy from her work. Tall. Mixed race. Real smooth. Worked maintenance at her school. I met him once at a Christmas party. Said maybe 2 words to me, but Sarah laughed at every joke he made. Said he helped her carry boxes or some crap like that. I couldn't remember his full name, but I remembered his jacket. Back in December, she came home with a hoodie that wasn't hers. Said it was a lost and found thing she borrowed because her car wouldn't start and it was cold. Didn't think much of it then. But now? I remembered the initials stitched on the sleeve in white thread. TB. TB Terrence Brooks. That was his name. I remembered it after flipping through Sarah's old work emails on our shared desktop. She'd saved a PDF of the school staff directory last year. There he was. Maintenance team. Hard part-time during summer break. Tall guy. Buzzed hair. Goofy smile. I stared at his face way too long. Couldn't help it. Trying to match features. The nose. The skin tone. The baby's eyes. And yeah, I saw it. I told myself I was crazy. That I was letting the doubt win. But looking at this guy's face on that screen, I felt something drop in my stomach. A dead weight. The kind of feeling you get when your gut says, hey man, you already know the answer. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I started noticing everything. The baby's skin tone wasn't the only thing. It was the shape of the lips. The angle of the chin. All the tiny details you never think about, until you have to. And there was Sarah humming through her day like she wasn't carrying the biggest secret of our marriage in her arms. She still kissed me goodnight. Still thanked me for changing diapers. Still called me babe like nothing was broken. And maybe for her, nothing was. Maybe this was all part of some quiet little game where I played the fool and she played innocent. But every time I looked at that baby, my supposed son, I felt myself pulling further away. Not out of anger. Out of confusion. Out of this growing, sinking feeling that I was raising a child that might have been built from someone else's DNA. The only thing I was sure of now? I couldn't live in the dark much longer. It's strange how something as small as a Q-tip can feel like a turning point in your life. I ordered the paternity test online. One of those quiet, discreet kits that doesn't come with judgment or questions, just a barcode, instructions, and enough emotional weight to sink a man. I didn't even think twice. Just clicked, "Buy now," and waited for it to show up in a plain box like it was nothing more than a new phone charger. When it arrived, I opened it with the kind of care you'd use to disarm a bomb. Sat at the kitchen table, box cutter in hand, staring at the contents like they were going to shout something at me. Swab one cheek. Swab the other. Easy, right? I waited until Sarah left to run errands. She said she was going to pick up diapers and formula. I nodded, acted normal. It's funny how good you get at pretending when you've got something to hide, especially when what you're hiding is that you think your whole life might be a lie. Once she pulled out of the driveway, I moved fast. The baby was asleep in the bassinet. Peaceful. Tiny. Completely unaware that I was about to put the future of our relationship in a plastic envelope. I swabbed his cheek as gently as I could. He stirred a little, made a soft sound, but didn't wake up. Just clenched his fists and went right back to whatever babies dream about. Then I did my own. Sealed everything up. Labeled it. And then I just stared at it. It looked so harmless. So clinical. But I knew better. That envelope didn't hold cotton swabs. It held truth. The kind of truth that can't be talked around or covered up with fake smiles. I drove it straight to the post office. Dropped it in the box. And the second it left my hand, I felt sick. Like I just handed over the last piece of peace I had left. There was no taking it back now. No pretending everything was okay. No, maybe I'm just overthinking this to fall back on. The test was out there. The answer was coming. And deep down, I already knew what it would say. They say waiting is the hardest part. I used to think that was just something people said when they were stuck in traffic or trying to hear back from a job interview. But this was a different kind of waiting. Every day after I mailed the test felt like I was holding my breath underwater. I'd get up in the morning, stare at the crib, and wonder what I was supposed to feel. Some mornings, I'd forget for a second, just long enough to think everything was fine. Then I'd remember. The envelope. The question hanging in the air like smoke. Sarah carried on like normal. Making bottles. Watching reality shows while the baby napped. She'd ask how work was, if I wanted anything from the store, if I could help with bath time. The usual. She kissed me on the cheek, told me I looked tired. Tired didn't even scratch the surface. I couldn't look at her without seeing a question mark where her trust used to be. I couldn't hear the baby cry without wondering if he was calling for someone else's father. Every little thing had a shadow under it now. At work, I made mistakes. Nothing dangerous, thank God, but enough to get a few side eyes. I told the guys I was dealing with new dad brain. They nodded. They believed me. And part of me hated that how easy it was to lie. Nights were the worst. I'd lie in bed next to Sarah, both of us dead silent. She'd drift off fast, exhausted. I'd stare at the ceiling like it might offer me answers. I wanted her to roll over and admit it. To say, yeah, you're not crazy. He's not yours. But she never did. Just slept peacefully while I unraveled half an inch at a time. The email came exactly 7 days after I mailed the test. I was sitting in the garage, avoiding a leaking water heater that I should have fixed 2 days ago, when my phone buzzed. A short subject line. Just, your paternity results are ready. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't tap it. Not yet. I stared at that message for what felt like hours. Because once I opened it, there was no going back. No more theories. No more denial. Just truth. And I wasn't sure I was ready for it. I didn't check the email right away. It came through just before noon, while I was in the garage, halfway pretending to fix that old water heater that had been leaking for 3 days. I wasn't really doing anything. Just crouched next to it with a wrench in my hand, staring at the floor like it owed me something. The buzz from my phone felt louder than usual. I glanced down, expecting another spam alert or maybe some bill reminder. Subject, paternity test results available. That stopped me cold. There it was, the answer I'd been chasing, delivered in one little line of text. 7 days of waiting, watching, overthinking, and now I had what I wanted. Except I didn't want it anymore. Not really. Not in that moment. I sat down on the cold concrete, back against the washer, and just stared at my phone. The screen dimmed. I tapped it. Lit up again. Still there. Still waiting for me to face it. It's funny. You think when the truth comes, it'll bring clarity. Peace, even. But the truth? The real, honest kind? It doesn't clean up your life. It wrecks it. When I finally opened the email, it felt like pulling a pin from a grenade I wasn't ready to throw. There wasn't a dramatic explanation. No flowery summary. Just the line. Probability of paternity, 0%. That's it. 2 digits and a percent sign. Nothing more. I read it again. And again. I wasn't hoping for a different number. Deep down, I knew. But I think I was hoping maybe I'd misread it. Maybe it would say 99%, and I could laugh at how paranoid I'd been. But no. It was clear. Scientific. Final. 0. It hit me in stages. First, like a cold slap. Then like a slow collapse from the inside. I felt like a balloon with the air punched out of it. Still holding shape on the outside, but absolutely hollow on the inside. That surprised me. I thought I might. Instead, I just felt numb. Like the part of me that would have cried had already dried up over the last couple weeks. The worst part? I wasn't even angry at that moment. Just quiet. That little boy in the crib, the one I'd rocked to sleep and sang lullabies to like some hopeful idiot, wasn't mine. I was a stranger to him. A placeholder. A guy with a car seat and a diaper bag and a lie to live. I thought about Sarah. About her face when she handed me that baby for the first time in the hospital. She looked so proud. So natural. Like she had pulled off the greatest magic trick in the world. And maybe she had. She handed me someone else's child and convinced me he was mine. I closed the email and just sat there, staring at the garage door, listening to the faint sounds of the neighborhood. Someone mowing a lawn. A dog barking. A kid laughing somewhere down the street. The world kept spinning like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just lost something I hadn't even known was missing. You always hear people say, at least now you know. Like knowledge is some kind of prize. But this didn't feel like a prize. It felt like a funeral. I hadn't just lost a son. I'd lost the illusion of a life I thought I had. Now the only thing left to figure out was what I was going to do with that truth. I didn't say anything that day. Or the next. I walked back into the house like nothing had happened, like I hadn't just read a truth that should have knocked the world off its axis. Sarah was on the couch with the baby on her chest, both of them asleep, like something out of a Hallmark card. I stood there for a second, just watching them. I thought about all the little things. The way she'd smiled at me while packing the hospital bag. The way she cried after giving birth, like she'd never felt more alive. The way she handed me that baby and called me Dad, without even flinching. Was she that good at lying? Or had I just been that blind? I went about the next few days on autopilot. Changed diapers. Warmed bottles. Took out the trash. Did all the stuff a dad's supposed to do, but it felt like I was playing a role I hadn't auditioned for. Every cue and cry felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's movie. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She was sleep-deprived, half-functioning, living in that foggy world new moms operate in. She thanked me more than usual. Told me I was amazing. Said she couldn't have done this without me. The words used to mean something. Now they just echoed. I started watching her closer. Not like before. This wasn't about paranoia anymore. This was different. I was observing her, like you watch a house guest who's overstayed their welcome. She had tells, little things I'd missed before. The way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day. The way she brushed off her phone like it was just full of grocery lists. She didn't know I already had my answer. I was planning my moment. Timing it. You don't just throw truth like this at someone over coffee. You wait. You control the setting. You pick your moment like a sniper picking a shot. Not to be cruel, but to make sure you don't get buried in deflection, fake tears, or whatever version of reality she was going to spin. So I stayed quiet. Watched. Waited. And all the while, that email sat there in my inbox. Read. Reread. Burned into my memory. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to throw plates or make a scene. I was just going to ask her one simple question. Whose kid is he, Sarah? And when I did, she wouldn't see it coming. It happened on a Sunday. Not that I planned it that way, but looking back, it almost made sense. Sundays were supposed to be slow. Sacred. Family day. A chance to breathe before the week kicked you in the teeth again. That morning, Sarah was in the kitchen, humming some song I didn't recognize. She looked tired but content. The baby was down for a nap, and for a second, I almost bailed. Almost let it slide one more day. Pretended a little longer. But I couldn't. The lie had started rotting everything from the inside out. I could feel it. Every time she said, our son, it scraped across my nerves like sandpaper. I needed to know what version of this life she thought she was living. What version of me she thought I was. So I waited until the dishes were done. Until the baby monitor was quiet. until we were both just sitting there at the table, 2 mugs of lukewarm coffee between us, and nothing left to do but face it. And then I asked, simple, calm, whose kid is he, Sarah? She froze. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, blinking like I'd spoken in another language. Then came the questions I expected. What do you mean? Why would you ask that? Is this some kind of joke? But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just looked at her. The kind of look that says, don't waste our time. Eventually, her face cracked. Not all at once. Just little fractures around the eyes, the mouth. Like her mask had been glued on too fast, and now the heat was peeling it back. She looked down at her coffee, like maybe the answer was in there. Then she said something vague, something about a mistake and not meaning for it to happen. I didn't respond. I'd already heard enough. I could see the panic in her eyes, the gears turning, trying to figure out how much I knew, how far she could backpedal before it all collapsed. So I handed her the printout, the test, the result, that beautiful, cold number, 0%. She didn't even finish reading it before her shoulders sagged, like the truth had finally caught up and landed on her spine. There was no yelling, no dramatic breakdown, no sobbing confession, just a quiet moment between two people who'd built a life on something that wasn't real and finally stopped pretending. She didn't cry. That surprised me. She just sat there, hunched over at the table, staring down at the test results like they might suddenly rearrange themselves and spell out a different ending. But they didn't. That 0% sat there like a brick on the page, solid, unmoving, undeniable. I think she knew then that the performance was over. No more stalling. No more soft lies wrapped in convenience. Just the truth, laid bare on a kitchen table that used to mean family dinners and now felt like a courtroom. She tried to say something, started a sentence, stopped. Tried again, stopped. Eventually, she gave up and just looked at me. Her eyes weren't defiant. They weren't pleading either. Just tired. And I was tired too. Tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't need to know the guy's name, though I had a pretty good idea. I didn't need the timeline, or the why, or that it only happened once. None of that mattered now. Whatever version she wanted to offer was just going to be damage control. What I needed was clarity, and I already had it. That baby wasn't mine. And if I was being honest, I wasn't hers anymore either. The rest of the day passed like fog. We didn't talk, didn't argue, just moved around each other in the house like strangers politely sharing the same air. She fed the baby. I stood in the doorway and watched for a few minutes, not really sure why. I didn't feel anger. Not in that moment. That had passed. What I felt was something colder, more final, a kind of grief, maybe, not for her, but for the version of my life I thought I was living. I took a long drive that night. No destination. Just the open road and the sound of my own thoughts bouncing around like loose change in a cup holder. It felt good to move. Like maybe if I drove far enough, I could leave behind the version of me who thought being a good husband would be enough. Spoiler, it wasn't. I pulled back into the driveway sometime after midnight. The house was dark, quiet. You'd never guess a bomb had gone off in there just hours earlier. I sat in the truck for a while, engine off, hands on the wheel, not moving. The air inside smelled like stale fast food and stress. I looked at the house and didn't feel much. Not hate, not sadness, just distance, like I was already halfway gone. When I finally walked inside, the lights in the hallway were off, but hers was on. The door was cracked just enough to show the soft glow. I didn't peek in. I didn't want to see her curled up with a box of tissues and a blanket, trying to look broken. She didn't get to fall apart now. She made that choice the moment she let another man into our life, into my life, without telling me. She handed me a baby, called him mine, smiled while I built a crib for someone else's kid. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. A big one. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started packing. Not much. A few shirts. Toothbrush. A pair of boots. Just the essentials. I wasn't storming out in some dramatic scene. I was removing myself like a man pulling a knife out of his own back. Halfway through folding a flannel, I paused. I looked down the hallway toward the nursery. The door was shut. Probably just like always, sound machine on. Soft nightlight glowing. He was in there. Sleeping. Oblivious to the storm brewing on the other side of the drywall. And that's when it hit me. He didn't ask for this. That kid didn't choose to be born into someone else's lie. He didn't lie to me. Didn't cheat on me. He just existed. And now, I had to decide what to do with that. I stood there in the dark and asked myself the one question that mattered now. Do I stay in his life, knowing he's not mine? It wasn't a question I could answer yet. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. All I knew was I couldn't sleep under that roof anymore. Not while she pretended things could go back to the way they were. The sun was just starting to break through when I zipped the bag shut. I stood there in the living room, staring at the walls like they'd give me a reason to stay. The framed wedding photo. The little collage Sarah made when we first moved in. A row of baby shower cards still stuck to the fridge, like everything was still sweet and whole. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. I just didn't see it until it was too late. I didn't leave a note. Didn't feel like I owed one. She knew why I was going. If she didn't, that said more than I ever could. I grabbed my keys off the hook. There was this weird moment, right before I stepped outside, where I paused. Just stood there, hand on the doorknob, listening. I could hear the baby crying faintly through the monitor still sitting on the kitchen counter. Sarah's door creaked open a second later. I heard her soft footsteps behind me. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. There were no last words. No parting shots. No, I'm sorry, or please don't go. Just silence. Heavy, loaded silence. And honestly, I was grateful for that. I opened the door, walked out, and didn't look back. Not once. The air outside was cold, but it felt clean. Honest. It didn't pretend things were okay. I got in the truck, fired it up, and pulled away from the curb like it was just another day. Like I was heading to work or grabbing groceries. But inside, I knew. That house wasn't home anymore. Whatever it used to be, it wasn't that now. Not after the test. Not after the look in her eyes when she realized I knew. Not after the silence that followed, the kind you don't come back from. I didn't know where I was going exactly. Maybe a motel for a few nights. Maybe crash at my brother's place if he wasn't too wrapped up in his own life. I didn't care. I just needed space. Space to figure out what kind of man I wanted to be, and whether that man had room in his life for a child that wasn't his, or a woman who made him believe it was. The motel was one of those places that felt like it hadn't changed since the early 90s. Beige everything. A bed that dipped in the middle. The TV mounted on the wall had that weird buzz no matter what volume it was on, so I left it off. Silence felt more honest anyway. I dropped my bag by the door and sat at the edge of the bed. No rush. Nowhere to be. No one expecting me. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't know what I was anymore. Not a husband. Not a father. Not in the way I thought I was anyway. That kind of truth, it doesn't come with relief. It comes with emptiness. It's not a weight lifted. It's a part of you cut loose. And now you're standing there, half the man you were yesterday, trying not to fall over. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor like maybe I dropped something important there, a piece of myself. Maybe. I kept waiting for anger to show up. Or sadness. But what I felt was more like a quiet fog, the kind that rolls in after a storm and hides everything you used to recognize. And in the middle of it all, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The baby. The one I held in the hospital, wrapped up like a little burrito, staring up at me like I was the center of the universe. I didn't feel like a stranger to him. I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt like Dad. And that's what messed me up the most. He didn't lie to me. He didn't break anything. He just existed, showed up in this world through no fault of his own, dropped into a lie that wasn't his to tell. I kept replaying little moments. The time he fell asleep on my chest. The sound he made when he sneezed. The way Sarah smiled when I rocked him in the nursery at 3 a.m., like we were a team, like we'd built something solid. Except we hadn't. I'd built it. She'd just let me. And now I was here, in this room that smelled like old soap and colder choices, wondering what kind of man I wanted to be next. Part of me wanted to disappear. Change my number. Move to some tiny town where no one knew my name or my story. Just start over. But another part of me didn't. That part wondered what kind of life this kid was going to have. Who was going to teach him how to tie a tie, change a tire, throw a baseball? Who was going to sit with him when the world felt too heavy? Because here's the truth I couldn't shake, biology or not. I'd already started becoming that guy. And I wasn't sure if I could just shut it off. I didn't make a decision that night. I didn't send a message or pack up to head back. But I didn't run either. I just sat there, still, quiet, listening to the hum of the motel fridge and the occasional car passing by on the highway. And in that quiet, I felt something small. Not peace. Not forgiveness. But maybe a little space. A crack in the wall where hope might live. The kind that doesn't fix anything, but gives you enough light to take one more step. I didn't know if I was ever going back, but I knew I hadn't lost everything. Not yet.